you're not using a system to hire a builder, your risk of hiring a bad one goes through the roof. I'm Aaron from Albatross Academy, and this is the exact system I teach clients to use so they can hire the right builder for their project. So let's get into it. How long should this hiring a builder process take? I estimate between 4 to 6 weeks. It usually takes that much to do the interviews, do the research, and eventually get through the contract phase. Let's start with the research phase. So before we get into which companies you should target, we're going to talk a little bit about 3 different sizes of companies and what they're all good at. We'll start with the small companies. Now, small companies, I would term between 1 and 10 members. These companies can be really cost effective because they often don't have a lot of overhead. They're not carrying huge insurance policies. They're not renting big office space. They don't usually have receptionists and accounting and payroll staff. So they can be quite streamlined. Now, the takeaway from that is the other side of the coin, that sometimes they're low on expertise. Sometimes they're low on manpower, and so they can't take on multiple jobs or large jobs at one time. Medium-sized companies, I would put between the 10 to 25 employee range. These can be a real sweet spot for new builds because they often have the manpower, they have the expertise, and they have the systems in place to do a new build really well and give a high level of service that often these types of projects are looking for. Now, larger companies, 25 plus, larger companies often have branched out of the residential stage, that phase that really was in their wheelhouse maybe at one time, and now they're looking into more commercial and industrial jobs because those are higher paying jobs, they're higher value jobs, and they can make more money. These companies usually have a lot of overhead, so they move quite slowly. So that's a downside sometimes when you're looking at residential construction. The upside is, of course, that they have the manpower and they have the systems in place to make those projects hum and move quite quickly. So the magic question is, who should you target for your project? Well, that depends, obviously. Are you doing a renovation, a smaller scale renovation, say under $400,000, $300,000 in renovation? Well, there I would be targeting smaller companies because, as I said, they're going to be more cost effective, they're going to have less overhead to deal with, and they're going to be far more streamlined and far more appropriate for that project size. Now, once you start moving into new builds and larger scale renovations, you can move into the higher of the smaller companies and the lower end of the mid-range companies, of the medium-sized companies, because they're going to have some systems in place. They're likely going to have maybe a site supervisor or a manager assigned to your project. So they're going to have some systems in place that are going to give you that level of service, but they're also going to be small enough to make you feel important and to make you feel like your project matters to them. So that's a real sweet spot for most projects out there. Anything in the larger of the medium-sized companies and up, the larger companies, they're going to be quite clumsy when it comes to the customization that likely your project needs. So now that we're in the research phase and we have an idea of the size of company that we want to target, we really want to try to hone in on companies that are able to do and often do the projects similar to the project you're looking for. So if you're doing a smaller scale renovation, you're going to look for companies that do that. Everybody will say that they can do everything and they have done everything, but what you're looking for is companies that do your type of project on a regular basis. Now, when you're cruising through the internet and you're looking for companies, you want to make sure to look for companies in your area. Some companies will cast a pretty wide net, and so you're going to want to Google like construction companies or renovation companies in my area. And hopefully you should pull up a list of about 8 or 10. And we'll talk a little bit next about how you can hone in and what to look for on those specific websites. And when we're looking through our Google reviews, we're looking for project-specific things like budget, like schedule, timeline, like communication, like not just good or bad or great or medium. That doesn't really help us here. You can also look for things like property forums, property owner forums in your area, real estate forums in your area, real estate websites, and things like Angie's List if you're in the States, or I think it's called Angie now. These are independent, kind of like a Yelp, but for construction companies. After finishing Google reviews, you can look into industry-specific forums or associations. Are they a member of your local builders association? Are they recognized by local real estate companies? And the last thing that you can do, I think, is go to your local hardware store and see if they can recommend a builder. See if they can recommend a number of builders. Now they may be a little hesitant because they have some skin in the game, they have relationships here, but sometimes you'll get a nugget of gold, and that can be really, really helpful. One thing I'm going to be looking for in reviews is specific patterns. Every now and then you might just get a cranky client that just says bad, and there's no specifics available. But I'm going to be looking for specific patterns. Over budget, over budget, over budget, over schedule, over schedule, over schedule. And that's when I'm really going to be looking to cross some builders off of my list. Ideally, you want to cast a wide net to about 8 or 10 builders in your initial list, and then we'll hone that down as we move through these phases. Another way you can either add or remove from this list is by asking someone that you know that's in the local trades. Now, they may not have experience from a consumer perspective, but they'll certainly know what it's like to work for that person. If they don't know exactly that person, they'll know someone who does. And that's a way that you can get kind of the inside track and information, what it's like to work with that person and what they maybe are really like. And now we're moving into the interview stage. That's where we're going to start with phone call, interview, initial meeting, where we're talking in more broad terms about your project. And then we're going to get into the more specific in-person meetings. So I would probably narrow down your broader website list to maybe 5 that you're actually going to give a phone call to. Maybe more. So in your initial phone call to these builders, please don't give them any specifics about your project. Just say that you're looking into builders for a project in the area. So you're going to be asking things like, what size company are you? What size of projects do you typically take on? What scope of work do you do on a typical project? All these somewhat generic questions will give you more insight into what they actually do well. It's important to come at it from this angle, because if you say, do you do renovations? They'll all say, well, sure we do renovations. If you say, do you do new builds? They say, sure we do new builds. But I want to know what kind of project they actually do well. Now, as I mentioned before, this is a summary of the How to Hire the Right Builder course that's available at albatrossacademy.ca. And that's where we go into far more specifics about the answers that we're looking for these types of questions. So ideally, after this initial phone call, you're crossing off a couple of builders that you don't think are going to fit your project. And now we're going to move into the in-person meetings, and this is where we're really going to get down to it, and we're starting to get more serious. In this initial in-person meeting, this is not the time to be asking the builder to price out your project. Generally speaking, you probably don't have your design fully developed yet, and generally speaking, your designer or your builder hasn't even seen this yet. So asking the builder to price this out is just simply not fair. Even giving you a ballpark price, the builder will really appreciate it too. This is the kind of meeting where you're still asking, what type of contracts do you typically use? How many workers? What size of projects are you doing? Typically, how many workers, what region do you typically work in? Are you licensed and bonded and insured in our area? And you're also judging what kind of rapport do you initially have with this builder? Can you get along with this builder? Is the builder interested in your project, or are they too busy? So this is the type of meeting where you're going to analyze and you're going to really take in as much information from the builder as you can. So in this interview, there are also a few warning signs that I want to talk about. If a builder is trying to pressure you to start something quickly and move more quickly than you're comfortable with, that's a warning sign for me. If the builder gives you some of those pressure tactics, or there's a reluctance to answer questions, or they don't want to provide references, or they won't put things in writing, they seem to maybe have a poor communication style, these are all warning signs for me, and I might be scratching some builders off the list. So once our initial in-person meetings are done, this is where we're going to start to do our verification and our reference checks. We're going to talk to the references. We're going to look at their licensing and their insurance numbers and make sure everything is valid. But most importantly, we're going to talk to those references. And we're going to talk to the references. We're going to ask them all kinds of questions about their experience. We're going to see some of the work. We're going to ask about their communication style, about the budget, about their schedule. We're going to see how the builder communicated all that information, because that's really, really important. So once we've decided on a builder that we're really, really excited to move forward with, we're going to move into the contract stage of our investigation. Once you're ready to move forward with a contractor into the contract phase, it's very, very important that you do not sign a contract with an associated value, a monetary value associated with it, if your design is not fully developed. You can sign a letter of intent, which is basically an agreement to agree later on. That's totally fine. And it'll give the contractor some level of assurance that you're eventually going to sign the contract and they're not wasting their time. But until your design is fully developed and there's a proper estimate done of your design and a number that spits out at the end that you're comfortable with, you cannot sign a contract. Now, in the course, we go through all different types of contracts and what projects they're appropriate for, but we just don't have the time to do that here. So whether it's a fixed price contract, whether it's a cost plus contract, whether it's a time and materials contract, or whether it's a construction management contract, we have to make sure that the type of contract fits your project and that the builder is getting as much value as they can, and the client, you, are getting the most value that you can as well. So let's say you're ready to sign the contract. There's a great big estimated value at the end that you're comfortable with. There's taxes we've included, or we've figured out who's paying the taxes. That's important. And now you're just about ready to sign that contract. Here's where I tell clients to maybe pause a little bit and write in a few things. We're going to write in a communication plan into the contract. Communication plan should outline how often the builder is meeting with you for regular, I say usually weekly updates, and what information is going to be conveyed in those meetings, and how often budget meetings are scheduled. And these are written into the contract so they are clad in stone, and it's a potential breach of contract if these aren't followed. And what this does is it ensures that the builder is transmitting information to you at a very, very regular interval, and that is absolutely critical for project success. Not only for your peace of mind as the client, but also make sure that the builder is actually gathering this data so that if our budget starts to slip or our schedule starts to slip, that we can actually course correct, because oftentimes what happens is projects, they just start and they just go, and then we get to the end and we say, how do we do? And if the answer is bad, then you can't course correct because you're at the end of the project already. So once your communication plan is included in your contract, now you're ready to sign away. And now you're ready to execute this contract. And now you're ready to build your house. And that's the most fun that you can have, I think. Once again, I'm Aaron from Albatross Academy. We help clients navigate their builds through online resources, online coursework, and one-on-one consulting. Thanks for watching.